Labour leader Keir Starmer has recently ruled out any coalition with the Scottish National Party. So a criticism that the Conservatives have levied at Labour ever since 2015, the 2015 general election, has been that under the Conservatives you can have a strong, stable, Conservative majority government. But under Labour, all you can possibly have is a coalition of chaos, where Labour are sort of dragged along by the ear by the SNP. And then there'll be another Scottish independence referendum, and then Scotland will leave, and then everything will fall apart and the world will explode. So Labour has, since that period, tried to make it very clear that they're not going to form a coalition with them. Ed Miliband said it in 2015, Jeremy Corbyn said it in 2017 and 2019, and now Keir Starmer is saying it. This is one of those weird times where I feel like I shouldn't even need to say this because everyone should know it by now, but apparently the Tories have got it so ingrained into people's heads that a lot of people do think Labour would form a coalition with the SNP. Starmer has made it clear now, under his leadership, absolutely not. And it seems like it doesn't really matter who is in charge of the party. That's not an option, because Labour is full of unionists, people who want Scotland to remain part of the UK, and obviously the SNP would want some significant changes to make Scotland more separate and eventually independent entirely. So what hope do Labour have, right, of even getting into government? That's the question. Because if they don't have the SNP, that means that against all the odds they'll have to win an actual majority to govern, doesn't it? And that would require them beating the Tories by, I think, more than 7% in the polls, because the current electoral system, first past the post, is very unfair anyway. But because of a little bit of gerrymandering, but mainly just to do with the changing demographics in the UK, Labour are really going to struggle. They require a lot more votes to win a majority than the Tories do. Labour probably would have to be looking at winning about 47% of the vote, while the Tories won like 40. Or alternatively, 41% of the vote, while the Tories won 33 or something like that, right? So it'd be a big ask to win a majority. So Labour are never going to be in government, are they? Well, no, there is a potential option. Labour could form a minority government, and I think that's probably what Starmer is vying for. So if Labour manages to beat the Tories by more than, say, 4 points, probably 3 or 4 points, right, in the polls, in the general election, they will probably win about the same number of seats. Which is ridiculous because Labour has won considerably more votes, so why should they win the same number of seats? Well, again, it's our stupid electoral system, but that would still be enough for Labour to form a government. They wouldn't have a majority. They'd probably be sitting somewhere between 260 and 280 seats. But they would be able to pass some legislation. The reason they'd be able to pass some legislation is because the SNP would probably have somewhere between 40 and 50 seats. Those seats would make up a full majority in the House of Commons for Labour, especially when you add in a few Lib Dems, the SDLP and a couple of others. So Labour would probably be able to pass some basic progressive legislation. Because Labour isn't super radical right now, the most radical thing they're talking about is this Green New Deal that Starmer's recently been talking about, which is a great policy. They may well be able to get that stuff passed. So there is method to the madness. And of course, there is the very slim chance Labour could win enough votes to get a majority. I think that's extraordinarily unlikely. Extraordinarily unlikely, especially the way Labour is conducting itself at the moment. But it is possible that they manage to form a minority government, even if they have fewer seats than the Tories. It is still possible, because the Tories have basically no allies in Parliament anymore. So the Lib Dems probably aren't going to make that mistake again of forming a coalition with them, or even, a sort of vague confidence and supply agreement. The SNP certainly aren't going to do that. And the DUP was stabbed by the Tories in the back, so it seems unlikely they would. So Labour would probably be able to kind of cobble together a coalition of them, the SNP, the Lib Dems, the one Green MP, or maybe 2 if the Greens had a great showing, I don't know. The SDLP and, a couple of independents, and hopefully be able to pass legislation, but it would be very difficult for them to do that. I think the best thing for them to do, if Labour does manage to be able to form a minority government in 2024, or whenever the next election is, the number one priority has to be passing proportional representation and creating a more transparent and more publicly financed campaign finance system, so that we don't have the influence of big money as much, and we have a much more representative and much more democratic way of electing our members of parliament. That way, you can run another election and a progressive coalition could potentially come into power, and the Tories wouldn't be able to get a majority even without the majority of the votes. So we'll see what happens. I think it's unlikely Labour will win the 2024 general election, but who knows, if they manage to get enough seats to deprive the Tories of a majority and form a minority government, I think absolutely first priority needs to be proportional representation and a public campaign finance system that's a lot more strict. However, who knows? It seems like Labour are very reluctant to support proportional representation, even though it would benefit them really, as long as they, stopped alienating their own base and their own voters so much. But we'll see. I don't know what your thoughts are. Do you think Labour should form a coalition with the SNP? Do you think that's actually a good idea? Do you think that Labour needs to be focusing a lot more on what's going on in Scotland and trying to quell nationalism, or do you think they should best just kind of keep quiet? What do you think? I'd love to know your thoughts. And what do you think they should do if they manage to just about get in as a minority government in 2024? I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it, because it's a very interesting topic. Thank you all for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next one.